He remembered the sound first, not the wind or the water, but the metallic rattle of his own footsteps hitting the walkway as he moved along the side of the Golden Gate Bridge. The morning had been cool, the kind of chill that sank straight through clothing, but he barely felt it. He moved with the tense, fixed focus of someone carrying a weight he could no longer manage. Cars rushed behind him in a steady roar, but none of the drivers noticed the young man gripping the railing with trembling hands, trying to steady his breathing while everything around him continued like an ordinary day. Hours earlier, he had woken in a state of panic that felt impossible to describe. It was the same crushing pressure he had battled for years, a collision of confusion, fear, and a desperate need to quiet the noise in his head. He walked through the apartment with the heavy certainty that something had already snapped inside him. He left a note behind, not because he wanted anyone to read it, but because he didn't know what else to do. The bus ride toward the bridge felt endless. He pressed his forehead to the window, convinced that if someone, anyone, asked if he was okay, he might turn back. But no one did. The city moved around him, unaware that a teenager in a worn sweatshirt was traveling toward one of the most dangerous decisions a person could make. When he stepped off the bus, the air smelled of salt and diesel. He felt tears forming before he reached the span, unsure if he wanted them to stop or fall freely. Tourists passed him with cameras, pointing at the skyline and the open water. He tried to blend into that normal crowd, even as his mind fought itself. He told himself that if just one person stopped him, he would turn around. People looked at him. Some even made momentary eye contact, but no one spoke. His pacing grew more frantic. His hands shook so violently he kept them in his pockets, hoping no one could see the distress he couldn't hide from himself. He leaned over the rail, staring 220 feet down at the cold water. The drop didn't look real. The distance felt distorted, as if he were staring into a photograph instead of the unforgiving surface below. He waited again, hoping a stranger might ask why he was standing alone, crying into the wind. A police officer on a bicycle passed close enough that he could hear the tires clicking on the metal decking, but the officer kept going. He inhaled a deep breath that caught halfway through his chest. In that instant, the battle inside him collapsed. He climbed the rail. The moment his fingers released their grip, regret hit him with more force than the fall ever could. His body immediately twisted in the air, and he remembered later how the wind ripped past his ears with a violence that stunned him back into clarity. He hadn't wanted to die. He had wanted the pain to stop, and now he understood too late that the desire to live had been buried beneath everything he couldn't figure out how to face. He hit the water in seconds. The impact felt like being struck by a truck. His legs buckled instantly, bones snapping with a clean, sickening break. The shock tore through his entire body. The cold was overwhelming, swallowing him before he could process the agony. He forced himself upward, kicking with shattered legs that barely responded. He felt his vision narrowing at the edges, black creeping inward as he fought to stay conscious. He gasped for air, spitting out seawater while crying out for help, each breath sharp with pain he could barely withstand. A shape appeared near him, large, dark, and moving in circles. For a moment, he feared it was a shark, the final moment of a life that seemed to be slipping away. But the animal moved beneath him, pushing his body upward just enough to keep him afloat. Whether it was instinct or something beyond understanding, the creature stayed near long enough for a rescue team to reach him. The Coast Guard pulled him from the water, shocked that he was still breathing. He faded in and out of consciousness as they lifted him onto the boat, his legs bent at unnatural angles, his spine damaged, his body shaking uncontrollably from the impact and the cold. At the hospital, surgeons worked for hours. He woke later in a haze of pain, surrounded by machines that beeped steadily as if reminding him that he was still alive. He learned that he had fractured multiple vertebrae, destroyed the function of his lower spine, and bruised organs from the force of the fall. Nurses told him survival from that height was almost unheard of. The doctors who examined his x-rays said the only reason he hadn't been paralyzed was the way he twisted in the air at the last possible second. A shift of inches would have changed the outcome entirely. Recovery was brutal. He spent months learning how to move without collapsing from pain. Every step felt like a negotiation between determination and physical limits. What kept him going wasn't a sudden revelation, but the slow, steady realization that he had been given a second chance by sheer luck and the will of strangers who refused to let him fade away. Therapists helped him confront not just the physical damage, but the inner fractures that had led him to the edge of the bridge. He learned to manage disorder, fear, and the thoughts that had once convinced him he couldn't keep living. Over time, he discovered that sharing what happened brought a purpose he hadn't expected. He spoke to students, veterans, police officers, and anyone willing to listen. His story reached people who thought they were alone in their suffering. He never denied the pain that had brought him to the bridge or the long struggle that followed. But every time he stood in front of an audience and described the moment he regretted letting go of the rail, he offered something he wished he'd heard on that morning: that the urge to disappear could pass, that help could come, and that surviving the worst moment didn't make a person weak. It made them someone who could help others through theirs. His life wasn't free of struggle afterward. The physical injuries stayed with him, and the mental battle remained something he managed daily. But the difference was that he no longer faced it alone. Support systems built around him. New routines replaced old patterns. And the memory of that brief instant of regret became a reminder that the desire to live had been inside him even when he couldn't feel it. His survival was extraordinary, but what mattered more was the life that came after, one built on honesty, resilience, and the determination to make sure no one else reached that railing without knowing they had someone willing to listen. His story traveled far beyond California, carried by the countless people he spoke to, each conversation a quiet testament to a moment that almost ended everything. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.